Hi friends, Miss Kristi here, and I am so excited that you're with me and we are cooking today. Today's recipe is cinnamon sugar tortilla chips. So this is a quick little snack that you can make yourself, and I'm just so excited to get started. So let me first go over the ingredients that you'll need to make this recipe. You will need about 4 corn tortillas, 1.5 tablespoons of sugar, 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, and 1 tablespoon of oil. Now the supplies that you're gonna need to make this recipe are a baking sheet, oven mitts, parchment paper, a tablespoon, 1/2 tablespoon, 1/2 teaspoon, a pastry brush, a pizza cutter, and then 2 small bowls. All right, now that we know the ingredients that we need to make this recipe and the supplies, the very first step whenever we make something together and whenever we're cooking is to wash our hands with soap and warm water for at least 20 seconds to get all the germs off. So I'm going to wash my hands. All right, now that our hands are super clean, we've gotten all the germs off, let's get started cooking this awesome cinnamon sugar tortilla chip recipe. So the very first step in this recipe is going to be to preheat our oven to 350 degrees. So I'm gonna do that quick. All right, while our oven is preheating, we're gonna start making this recipe. So the very first thing I'm gonna do is we're gonna grab our parchment paper, and it's probably gonna look like a box like this. And you're just gonna rip out a sheet to cover our baking pan. It's gonna make it a lot easier for cleanup and so things don't stick. So you're just gonna take it and rip off a sheet about the size of your baking pan. All right. And then you can actually just set that right on the counter. I have a cooking board or cutting board here that I'm gonna work on today, but if you wanna put yours right on the counter, that's fine. So we've got our parchment paper down, and now the next thing is to start getting our ingredients. So the very first thing we're gonna do is measure out 1.5 tablespoons of sugar. So I'm gonna first grab my tablespoon, and I'm gonna grab my sugar. So your sugar might look a little bit different, which is fine, as long as you're using like a white sugar, or I'm using like organic raw sugar, whichever you prefer. But we're just gonna take 1 tablespoon, and then you're gonna grab a little bowl that you have, and you're gonna do 1 tablespoon in there. And now I need my 1/2 tablespoon. So we're gonna grab 1 tablespoon, or 1/2 tablespoon, and again, measure that, just scoop it out, and then we're gonna dump it in our little bowl. Okay, so we're done with the sugar, and when I'm done with something in my recipe and when I'm cooking, I like to just set it to the side. That way I know I'm done with it. All right, next ingredient is going to be our cinnamon. So we need 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon. So I'm gonna grab my 1/2 teaspoon. I took the lid off my cinnamon. I have a big jar here. You might have something smaller. Measure out 1/2 teaspoon and dump it in. Again, just gonna put this to the side. All right, so now we have our bowl with our cinnamon, and I'm just gonna mix it together to incorporate it. And again, your sugar might be white. Mine's a little bit bigger and a brown color, but as long as it's sugar, you're fine. And we're just gonna mix it together to mix the cinnamon and sugar, and then I'm just gonna set it to the side. So next thing is we need 1 tablespoon of oil. Now, I have a grapeseed oil. You could use a vegetable oil, you could even use an olive oil. The olive oil might make it taste a little bit different, but a vegetable oil or a grapeseed oil has a really neutral taste, so that's why I'm using that. I'm gonna grab my second little bowl here, and we need 1 tablespoon. So you're gonna get your tablespoon back out, and you're gonna measure 1 tablespoon of oil and just dump it in your bowl. And I'm gonna put that to the side. All right, the next step is going to be grabbing 4 corn tortillas. So I have tortillas here, and for this recipe, it's a smaller snack that we're making. If you wanted to make more, you could just do more corn tortillas and a little bit more oil. But for this recipe, we're gonna use 4 corn tortillas. gonna take those out. All right, so I have my corn tortillas and I'm just gonna lay them out on my parchment paper. And now comes the fun part. So you're gonna take your oil and you're gonna dip your pastry brush into the oil. And you're just gonna brush them on the corn tortillas. And you're gonna do both sides and you're gonna do all 4 tortillas. And if you happen to use a lot of oil and you run out of oil, you can always just do a little bit more. This is basically so the cinnamon sugar sticks to it. So not a big deal if you have to use a little bit more or you don't end up using all of it. All right, I've got one side, I'm gonna flip it over. I'm gonna do the other side. All right, I had just enough oil, so. All right, now that our corn tortillas have the oil on them, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to take my parchment paper and I'm actually gonna put it on top of my baking sheet so I can cut them. It just makes it easier, less things to have to pick up and move. So, all right, so now I have my corn tortillas laid out nicely on my parchment paper on my baking sheet, okay? Now we get to cut them. I'm using a pizza cutter because it makes it a little bit easier. If you don't have a pizza cutter, you can always just use a knife. But what I'm gonna do is I'm going to cut them into small pieces that look like tortilla chips. So I'm just taking it, I'm cutting them in half and cutting them in half again. If you wanted really big tortilla chips, you could just leave it like this. I'm actually gonna cut it one more time. So each tortilla that I have is making 8 little tortilla chips. So I'm just gonna do that with each tortilla. And if they're not the same size or they get to be a weird shape, that is okay, because you are eating them and they're gonna be delicious regardless of what they look like. Okay, now that we have them all cut up into their little tortilla shapes, I'm just gonna spread them out a little bit. You wanna try not to overlap them on the pan because they're gonna cook a little bit more even if they all have their own space to be nice and happy and cook on the sheet. So I just spread them out a little bit, and now I'm just gonna take my ½ tablespoon and take my cinnamon sugar and I'm sprinkling it over the top, and then we're gonna flip them and we're gonna sprinkle the other side. So just kind of a gentle sprinkle. If you get too much, it's okay. You'll just have a really yummy tortilla chip that has a ton of flavor on it. But to the best of your ability, you're just gonna sprinkle this right on top. And you wanna make sure you cover them all. All right, so I have one side coated with our cinnamon sugar mixture, and now I'm just gonna flip every little one over, and we're gonna do the same thing and sprinkle it on the other side so it's nice and tasty all the way through. And my fingers are getting a little bit messy, but that's okay because cooking can be messy, but that's what also makes cooking a little bit fun too. All right, so they're all flipped over. Now I'm gonna take the rest of my cinnamon sugar and I'm going to sprinkle it on the back. And if for some reason you completely run out of cinnamon and sugar before you've sprinkled them all, just go ahead and make some more. Mix some more cinnamon, mix some more sugar based on our recipe, and just add some more. All right, awesome. So our tortilla chips are soaking in awesome cinnamon and sugar mixture, and we're about to put them in the oven. We're going to actually take our oven mitts, so let me rinse my fingers a little bit. So I had some cinnamon and sugar on it. So I'm gonna take my oven mitts, put them on for safety. We don't need to burn our hands or our arms. And I'm gonna pop this in the oven for 12 minutes. So I'm gonna put it in, set a timer for 12 minutes, and as soon as that timer goes off, we're gonna take them out, set them on some oven mitt or in a pot holder or like my cutting board, and let them cool for a few minutes. So in they go. All right, so our 12-minute timer just went off, and I'm gonna pull out our cinnamon sugar tortilla chips and see how they look. So they look super tasty. Now you won't see a big color change on these. They only cooked for 12 minutes, but they are gonna be crunchy as soon as they cool. So I'm gonna let them cool, and then I just grabbed a plate that we're gonna put them on as soon as they're cool. All right, and here they are, our cinnamon sugar tortilla chips. A quick, simple snack that we made in just a few minutes, and I think that they look great and they taste delicious. I can't wait for you to try them. Now, if you want to cook along with me next time on our next episode, we are making Southern biscuits. So in order to do that, let me tell you what ingredients that you're gonna need to have ready so we can cook together next time. You will need 1 cup of flour, a half a tablespoon of baking powder, 1/4 teaspoon salt, 1.5 tablespoons of honey, 4 tablespoons of butter, and 1/3 cup milk. So I hope you come back and join me next time to make those Southern biscuits. I am so glad that we got to cook together today. And if you enjoyed this episode and you want to keep cooking with me, make sure you subscribe, and we're just gonna have a great time on the show. Thanks so much for joining. Bye, friends.